What's on the radio, man?
Howdy folks, welcome to Musical Shenanigans. Quick post-production, Cory here. This is releasing on August 1st, which just happens to be Scott's birthday. So Scott, Satan loves you. And you know what? Everybody else, Satan loves you too. Praise Satan, merry birthday. And now, the show.
Hey folks, welcome back. It's Scott praising Satan.
And this is Cory, I guess also praising Satan.
Yeah, me too. It's Dave. Hello.
And welcome back to Musical Shenanigans.
If you're new to the show, that might make sense to you, but if not, welcome aboard anyways. We discuss a lot of the albums from the Rolling Stone Top 500. We pit them against each other randomly. Now we're into what we call our first Wildcard Round, where we took about 128 of them and we're whittling them down to about 16. And then we'll go back to our usual format after that. So go into the back catalog or not. But welcome aboard.
Yeah, actually, the wild card bracket. So, quick background on this. So, like Cory said, we started with 128 albums, but the wild card actually is 64 additional albums that we had talked about on earlier shows, but hadn't actually put up against one another. And actually, the show that you're listening to right now, don't get too used to it, because these are the last 8 albums in our original group of 64. As of the end of this episode, we will have made it all the way through round 1 of the wild card with those 64 albums. So let's get started and dive right into our first matchup.
Okay, and speaking of 64, we begin with Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. We have brought back your favorite cage match, ladies and gentlemen. It's the Beatles against the Rolling Stones. The Beatles walk in proudly, dressed like some Edwardian-era military band in fabulous bright colors, touting their incomparable Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. The Rolling Stones also come out with their Beggars Banquet album, with an evil presence standing at the left elbow of Brian Jones. Can you guess his name? Looking like the badass rock and rollers that they are. You can hear more of our thoughts on Sgt. Pepper's and the Beatles back on Season 1, Episode 4, and on Season 1, Episode 5 for the Rolling Stones with Beggars Banquet. But we're going to begin with Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band.
Yeah. The Beatles.
You know. There's. I'm sorry, but there's an interesting thing. You know, people go, "You're either a Beatles guy or an Elvis guy." I think that's wrong. I think you're either a Beatles guy or a Stones guy.
I've always heard it Beatles versus Stones.
Yeah, I've always heard it as Beatles and Stones. When did you?
I've never heard Beatles versus Elvis.
Really?
Yeah. Was that after an abduction? You came up with that?
Maybe I'm just hearing it as a Pulp Fiction reference. I don't know. Anyway.
Yeah, no, I can't.
Thank you for that non sequitur. Yeah.
You're welcome. You're welcome. See, this is what I do for the show.
This is pinnacle Beatles.
Yeah.
I think everything they've ever done and everything they ever did is encapsulated right here, right in this album. Down to the art.
Yeah. The Beatles are long acknowledged as being sort of the great innovators of early rock and roll. And this one is a huge part of the reason. Just between the idea of sort of creating these alter egos and this whole different band that they dressed up as, to musical innovation. They brought in orchestras. They brought in like old 20s style music hall themes, sound effects all over the place. And this was actually the first album to include a lyric sheet along with it. So if you wanted to actually follow along with the words, this was the first album where you could do that.
I mean, think about it. That is something that we've lost with LPs. And we bring this up a lot when we talk about the loss of LPs. But the art on this one, and just, you could study this cover for hours.
Yes.
I know I did.
Yes.
I know it was great to actually have the reference of like who these people are, and then eventually be like, okay, you saw the name, but you're like, who the hell is that?
Yeah, so if you're a little younger, you don't know what Cory's talking about. So you have the 4 Beatles on the cover dressed in their alter ego characters, and then behind them they have, this was pre-Photoshop, but they did cut and paste of different figures from throughout arts and history, And like Cory said, you could spend hours just going face to face trying to see if you could name everybody who's in that quote unquote group photo.
Yeah, it's a real who's who.
And finding the other pictures of the Beatles and the flowers, too.
Right.
Oh, no. I'm sorry. That's on the Stones album, where the Beatles are on there, but the Stones are mentioned on the doll on the far right side. It says, "Welcome the Rolling Stones" on the shirt. So they just kind of did a nod to each other.
Album covers, kids. It was a thing.
It really was.
Yeah. And there's so many songs that became massive hits off this album. You have With a Little Help from My Friends, Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds,
Oh, yeah.
Benefit of Mr. Kite, of course, A Day in the Life, which is just phenomenal. Strawberry Fields Forever, Penny Lane.
Right.
Oh no! Actually, no. I'm sorry. Those two tracks were left off the album. Actually, the Strawberry Fields Forever and Penny Lane. That was the stuff that was considered not good enough to make the album.
Well, no,
Right,
and they
wow.
released months before the album. So this was what we talked about, I think, with Rubber Soul, where Day Tripper and We Can Work It Out, they wanted an early release of stuff because, they needed to just keep the Beatles in the spotlight because, God forbid, people forgot about them, which was never going to fucking happen. Yeah, they had to put out like a single, so they put out Strawberry Fields and Penny Lane, which, yes, you can call it a double A-side because both of them were phenomenal hits.
Agreed.
This was also the innovation in the studio. This
Oh,
was
yeah.
when you made the studio the other member of the band.
Oh yeah, they learned they clearly knew what they were doing this time around in the studio, and they pulled out all the stops.
We don't have Dark Side of the Moon without Sgt. Pepper's.
Oh no, definitely not.
And actually, sorry Scott, but Sgt. Pepper's was a little bit inspired by Pet Sounds.
Well,
They kind of heard some of the fun stuff they were doing there, and they went, "Oh, we can do this."
Yeah,
They did it better.
There was a little short-term war between the Beach Boys and the Beatles, and this was part of that back and forth, no question.
Well, yeah, but the Beatles did it better.
I don't think anybody.
Oh,
I don't even
absolutely.
think the Rolling
Yeah.
Stone list would argue with that.
Right.
Oh, they do, because they put Pet Sounds at number 2, and
Was
Sgt.
Pet Sounds
Pepper's at 24.
Was Pet Sounds at number 2? All right, well, fuck me.
Yeah,
I'm
Pet
lost.
Sounds was number 2.
All right, well,
yeah.
fuck 'em.
Dumbasses. God damn it. Fucking morons. You stupid cocksuckers over at Rolling Stone. I swear to fucking God. Come in there with
You're going to
a
go down
knife
there and have them
fucking
slam their dicks
stab
in
you
the
all in
doors.
the eyes and slam your dicks in doors and fucking chew off your feet for you.
This is, I remember we talked about the first Pink Floyd album, Piper at the Gates of Dawn, that was also recorded at Abbey Road Studios right down the hall while this album was being recorded. And the thing that kind of ties those two together is Syd Barrett, notwithstanding his ultimate sort of descent into madness, what he was so good at, and the reason Pink Floyd ever got off the ground, was he had this mastery of being totally experimental and weird and trying new things, but just enough of the familiar, poppy, enjoyable sing-along sound where he kind of rode that fine line. And so you kind of got people microdosing on the weirdness, right, without actually fully embracing that's something that's totally foreign. This was also the Beatles' niche, and especially on this album, same thing. Like, there's weirdness, there's sound effects, there's experimentation all over the place, but they're catchy little tunes to go along with it.
Well, I was going to say, but the Beatles weren't insane.
Yes,
So,
yeah. Well, and they did it better as a result. I mean, I'm not going to
Right,
put
yeah.
this album against Piper. This is way better than
no,
Piper.
God, no. Yes.
But it's the same kind of concept of like riding that fine line between the familiar
is.
and the experimental.
Yeah, for the time, this was excessively experimental. I mean,
I don't think everybody in the studio was dropping acid. I think that's
No.
where George Martin, acting as the parent, steps in and goes, "All right, this is all probably a little too ridiculous. Let's bring this back. Let's rein this in a little.
Right.
And here we go, right here."
Great.
Whereas, Syd Barrett down the hall are doing Interstellar Overdrive, and someone should have stopped that shit early.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, the bookends of that are great, but all that stuff in the middle, it's like, what the God's name is this?
right, lads, you hear that mess down the hole? You hear that? I'm going to turn it up for you real loud here. Yeah, you hear that? Yeah? Okay, don't do that. All right? just don't fucking do that. Real simple. Damn.
So yeah, look, it's a great. Nobody's ever going to argue with the fact that Sgt. Pepper's is a great album.
Right.
It is. I do think you can levy some criticism though. So number one, first of all, this album is not as great as everybody remembers. There are a ton of hit songs that were catchy as hell and are still classics today. There's also a lot of lesser stuff on this album that frankly could have been better. It's just She's Leaving Home, Within You, Without You is a sort of a weaker song in my opinion. You already kind of alluded to it, Cory. When I'm 64, big hit, but really kind of a stupid, silly song, honestly. Not their greatest, in my opinion.
It's kitschy.
It's definitely kitschy.
It's yeah.
Yeah.
And I don't know, Getting Better I don't think is bad at all. But
I don't know. I like Getting Better.
Yeah, me too.
Maybe it's just Ringo. Once again, you have Ringo singing there. And
Dave's just a Ringo hater. He's like, fuck
No,
Ringo.
McCartney was the lead on Getting Better.
Was he?
Yeah, Ringo only sang With a Little Help from My Friends. That's the only song
yeah.
he sang on this.
Oh, all right. Well,
He's
Th-
just, it was,
then
it was Ringo's
then
fucking
I
playing.
then, well no that's fair because that means I really don't like the song then. So that's clearly not the explanation.
Oh,
Okay.
All right. Well, there you go.
The other thing is people will point to this and they say, oh, they were the first one to master the concept album. Well, you're being a little generous with the term concept album because the whole Sgt. Pepper's alter ego thing was really 3 whole songs. That's it. 3 songs on a double album. Even Lennon would say in interviews after the fact, he's like, yeah, I don't get it. He's like, as far as I'm concerned, none of the other songs had anything to do with the whole Sgt. Pepper's concept.
Right.
The concept was the cover, was just the art.
Yeah, so
That's
people
where it was.
People remember this as, one of the first times an artist created an alter ego and cut an entire album as an alter ego. Well, they didn't. They didn't do that here, despite what people think happened. This was largely just another Beatles record.
Right.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay. So it was up against Beggars Banquet.
Yes. Now, Beggars Banquet, where the correlation is, came right after they did their Satanic Majesty's Request. And that was kind of where the Stones tried to do a Sgt. Pepper's.
Speaking of the psychedelic movement.
Yes, and that one came out in December of 67, and Sgt. Pepper's came out earlier in 67. So it was like they were trying to hop on board and do the same thing. Yeah, they did theirs in May. And even Keith Richards went, oh yeah, their Satanic Majesty's Request was complete shite. But on that cover, you can find pictures of each of the Beatles inside the flowers on that.
Oh, there you go.
But you could study that cover. But moving away from that, this was the album that followed it, where they were getting back into their own and getting back to what they do best. I mean, when you open with Sympathy for the Devil.
Oh, such a good song.
Yeah, this was I think Mick said in an interview, like this was either Mick or Keith, one of them said it. This album was where they reached their, quote, musical manhood, where they like sort of grew into what they were going to be as a band for that point forward. And yeah, Sympathy for the Devil is a fantastic. Sympathy for the Devil is one of those ideas that's like, once you hear it, you're like, God damn, why did I not think of that? Because this idea that they took of, we're going to take Satan and we're going to go to all these horrific moments in history, and we're going to have this little story that basically he was the driving force of all these horrible moments in history. And it works so well, but it's such an obvious concept. It's like, how were you guys the first ones to think of this?
Well, I would point you to Russian author Mikhail Bulgakov that wrote The Master and Margarita. And he depicted the devil being at the arm of like Pontius Pilate, and being at different parts of history where bad things were happening. So they could have pulled from that, but maybe not.
Or maybe that guy should have done an album instead.
Well, no. You know what? Hold on. Let me see when that book was written, because that might make a difference. It could have been the other way around. No, it first published in 66, so it was before it. But who knows if they read it or
barely
not.
before it. I mean, not a
Barely
just
before
barely,
it, so
yeah.
it might have had some influence.
It could have. Oh, no, I'm wrong. No, Satanic was 67. I'm looking at that one. I'm not looking at Beggars Banquet. Beggars Banquet is
68.
68.
Yeah.
So it's possible. But I'm just saying there is a literary reference there, and you know what? Good on them if that's what they were pulling from.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
But if not, it's still a brilliant concept.
we also, on some of those earlier shows, we talked about the fact that a lot of the British invasion acts, in a lot of ways, were reintroducing American audiences to their own music. And this album, there's a lot of blues influences. Keith was doing a lot of slide guitar work on this album. And it's another one of those examples where they actually went back, and there was one song on this album called Prodigal Son. It was originally written by old Mississippi blues guy, Reverend Robert Wilkins, in 1929. By the time the album comes out, he's 72 years old. And, not a wealthy man, because nobody in 1929 made a ton of money, especially no black artists in 1929 made a ton of money off their album or off their songs. The royalties kind of start coming in, and by this point he's a minister, and so he's now flush with cash to kind of fund his ministry from this point forward. Because it caused, again, American audiences, go back to check out the original. He starts seeing his old recording sales picking up again.
Another clear case of them helping us rediscover our own music.
Exactly.
Oh, I just pulled up Sympathy for the Devil. In the 2012 documentary Crossfire Hurricane, Jagger stated that his influence for the song came from a Baudelaire and from the Russian author Mikhail Bulgakov's novel The Master and Margarita.
Well,
there you go.
Which had just
Good
appeared
call.
in English translation in 1967.
All right.
Yep. Okay.
Good call.
Yeah. Well noted, sir.
Yes, but this was definitely
Praise Satan.
an album where they were going back
Literally.
to what they did best.
Yeah, definitely.
Praising Satan.
and I point to No Expectations as one of those other perfect songs. The feel of the song, the lyrics, everything just worked on it. And I believe this was one of the last with Brian Jones.
Yeah, I think so.
I think he passed not too long after this.
This is on the downside. This is one of these examples of a Stones album where you've got a few great songs and then a lot of not so great stuff. You could name the big hits like Sympathy for the Devil. Obviously, we just talked about Street Fighting Man, and then what else from this album? Not much, frankly, that managed to break through.
No, not very much.
They're all great songs, but yeah, they're not great. They're good songs.
Not their best work,
No.
but certainly not their worst.
No, and this is probably not a great example of the Beatles. I think I'm voting first anyway, so I'll actually segue here. This is not a great example of the Beatles versus Stones debate, because here, in my mind, it's kind of a no-brainer. We just talked about how this is Beatles at their best, at Stones at their good but not great. So for me, it's clearly Sgt. Pepper.
Yeah. And Scott, you vote second.
Yeah,
so.
I'll definitely go with the Beatles on this. I mean, as much as I love Sympathy.
Yeah, exactly. As much as I do love the Stones, I mean, it's Sgt. Pepper's, an album that should have been ranked much, much higher.
Oh, fuck
and I think
yeah.
it has, in the past, but for some reason they dropped it to 24.
Yeah. Well, somebody was on crack that day.
I don't know. That's a pretty good ranking, honestly, on a list of 500 albums. Coming 24 is not. It's nothing to sneeze at.
No, it's not.
Well,
It's not.
It brings us to the next ones.
So this week, we have a little bit of something different. You probably have figured this out. I mean, we don't talk about it a lot on the show, and of course, we're not all like primary musicians. A lot of us have day jobs, but we do all play music in our spare time. In fact, all three of us played together very briefly. Cory was in a band with Scott for a long time. I'm actually currently in a band with Cory. We all play musical instruments in our spare time. And as luck would have it, our own Scott is actually in a new band, and they are quite good. And so we wanted to tell you a little bit about them.
Yeah, so we want to share a song with you. They're called Godless Idol.
It's Idol.
You know what? That makes a lot more sense. Huh.
Yeah.
Godless Idol. You can find them on Bandcamp. It's a track that's just with Scott and this woman Teresa singing with him, and she is fantastic.
Scott is a very good guitar player, but and not to take anything away from Scott's guitar playing, but honestly, the secret weapon here is her vocals. She is just an amazing singer.
Yeah, so we will post a link, but otherwise it is on Bandcamp, and if you're not familiar with Bandcamp...
So here's what you do. Go to godlessidol.bandcamp.com, and they do spell idol a little bit differently than probably what you're thinking, so it is GODLESSIDYLL, all one word, .bandcamp.com. And that should take you right to it. And they got about 3 tracks up there now. I'm sure they're going to be releasing more, but right now they got about 3 tracks. And as I said, we're going to give you a little bit of a taste and sample one of their tunes right now.
Yeah, so here's On the Train Ride Home, and then we'll just go right back into the show from here.
Check them out.
down at the station. I don't remember. I think it was late then. Standing, always so quiet, like elevators filled up with strangers. No sound, no hallelujah. Still I was praying on the train ride home. If I can't get the things I want, if I can't get the things I want, just give me what I need. Our words fill up the pages, fill up the days with songs for the ages. Still those vows that we all speak, we break 'em like concrete, just make our words cheap. I want someone to grow with, songs I can sing to, and a family to cling to. If I can't get the things I want, if I can't get the things I want, just give me what I need. Give me what I need.
All right, so let's move on to the next round. Kanye returns, and this time with his 808 and Heartbreak album.
I got the
So-
cows in the background, back of my eyes. I don't know what things between my thighs and little ducks swinging on the trees.
Okay. Well, do you all remember that scene in Raiders of the Lost Ark when the ninja-looking dude starts swirling his sword around and trying to look all menacing, and then Harrison Ford just takes out his gun and drops him like a wet sack of groceries? Well, folks, Kanye is that sword-wielding idiot taking on the Beatles and their eponymous album, often referred to as the White Album. So happiness, as it is said, is a warm gun. And if you're interested, you can hear us talk more about both of these albums back on Season 1, Episode 4. So let's begin with the White Album, since we're on a Beatles roll.
Well, do we really need to beat this horse any more than? I mean, it's right at this point. It's just a stain. So.
I mean, there are some very high points,
It's
and
a
there are
great
some low
album.
points.
It's a great album.
The White Album is one of my favorites. I love this. Love this album.
While my guitar gently weeps, dude, just that riff alone is just fucking perfect.
Yes.
Again, George Harrison. You know, this was a guy really coming into his own.
Yeah, that song to me is the apex of, my God, you idiots! Why did you not get out of the way and let this guy write some more music?
Really. Yeah, I mean, he clearly had his codpiece on there, and he was fully greased up and ready.
Frank
That
framed
one,
him
no,
well.
Frank,
Yeah.
no, that sentence actually works even if you don't know the backstory on that. The other one, I think I've already done it once on this episode. I bag on Ringo all the time, but you know what? Got to hand it to you, dude. On your blues and the song "Long, Long, Long" in particular, in both cases, I'm listening to the drums and I'm going, "Holy shit!" Ringo is starting to figure some stuff out now. All of a sudden,
Well, it couldn't get
You
worse.
know what? No. That's not fair. Ringo is opening up more. Ringo has always been a drummer that has played the drum line that befits the song. And
okay, that's
he's
fair.
very talented.
That's
I think
fair.
he could do a lot more, but he was not a show off. He was not a Keith Moon. He was not a John Bonham. He played what was appropriate. And if you were to pull in a Ginger Baker, a John Bonham, or a Keith Moon into the Beatles, it would not be the same.
oh no, I definitely have to agree with you on that. Definitely have to agree with you on that.
So where there's a little bit more room for him to step out, he took it. And when it's not appropriate, he doesn't take it.
Well, I'm issuing Ringo my formal apology because he did impress me on those two tracks in particular.
So yeah, I'm not gonna diss Ringo. It's not gonna happen.
When we start talking about Meg White, then we'll get into that. But
Oh, wow.
so look, White Album is a classic. There's a couple of things, though, that I could criticize about it. Now, one is, I'm going to admit up front, this is not fair because nobody could have seen this coming at the time. But back in the USSR, right now with what's going on in Russia, it's coming a little cringy, especially when you get to the line of, Ukraine girls really knock me out, leave the West behind.
Yeah.
Again, nobody writing that at the time could have known what was going to be going on in 2022. But
Right.
I mean, let's keep this in perspective. This album was what, 1968?
Fair enough.
So yeah, this was even before the Berlin Wall came down. This was about the time. Did they actually play in Russia then?
oh yeah, no, they did. I think they did multiple shows in the old Soviet Union
Okay.
Yeah.
But before they stopped touring altogether.
when they were still touring, right?
I've seen that.
Right. Yeah, but that wasn't something that nobody then toured in Russia again until the 80s. If you play this show backwards, you'll hear Scott saying really nice things about people.
This episode is Scott's Revolution number 9. Which, by the way, another low point on this album.
Oh my God.
Dude, what the fuck was that?
It's clear.
I feel sorry for the people with the LPs that had to pick up the needle
Right.
and move it.
Well, it's clearly somebody, and let's face it, John, playing around
Yeah.
in the studio trying to see like what he can do with echoes and repeats, and it's an interesting sonic experiment. How the fuck it made the cut for the actual album, though, I don't understand.
Yeah, for everybody out there, if you've not heard it, listen to it once.
Yeah,
Just so you know what we're talking
this is
about.
not. There's two revolutions on this album. There's Revolution number 1 and Revolution number 9. Revolution number 1 is the one you say you want a revolution. This is not that song. Revolution number 9 is. There's nothing I could do to even begin to describe it to.
Number 9, number 9, number 9, number 9.
No, it is an acid trip. It's an acid trip on tape.
Yeah, okay. That's being generous, but all right.
Well,
It's a bad acid trip on tape.
It really is.
It's you know what though? It's still better than Kanye.
Well, so let's get to that. So
Okay.
so we have the White Album, and it's up against Kanye's 808s and Heartbreak. This is one of the positives that I've given Kanye in the past is he has always been willing to reinvent himself, despite the fact that it probably would have been more profitable to not do so. This is another one where right out of the gate there's this track Say You Will, and it is totally clear that even if you're a Kanye fan, you're about to get something that is very different than what you've had from him in the past. First of all, he's singing, albeit with auto-tune, but he's singing. There's little to no samples on this album, which of course he's had this reputation for being heavy with the samples. This is all like minimalist synthesizers, drum machine. There's very little going on here musically by design. It is, you don't have to like it, but credit to him for trying something different.
We've said that about him many times. He does try to reinvent himself. It's never going to work, but he does try.
And this, but I will say it also, this was very influential. Like when it came out, I was reading reviews, when it came out, it was sort of criticized that it was too emotional because the background on this was his mother had just died right before this. He had broken up with his... He had broken up with a fiance. He was starting
Alexis, right?
Alexis something.
Like
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
And he was also starting to grapple with the fact that he had achieved all this fame and wealth that he'd wanted all his life, but he was incredibly lonely and isolated, and he really didn't see that coming. And so there's a lot of like raw emotional on this. And when it came out, a lot of people said, oh my God, it's too emotional. Whatever happened to fun Kanye? Well, now this whole concept of emo rap is very much a thing in hip hop. Like there's a whole subgenre of people bearing their souls through it in the hip hop format. And it's a lot of it traces back to this album.
Yeah, you know what? I did note that minus the rapping, it's not really that bad. I mean, this is Kanye being the producer. And when he's the producer, you know, we've said this many times, he's much better at that than he is in front of the microphone.
Yeah, honestly, this is an album that I didn't want to gnaw off my feet to. It was like, okay, I could listen to this if I had to. And, you know, it's not as... It's out of all the stuff that Kanye's done, this is, like, not his worst. So...
Yeah, if I of all the Kanye albums that we've talked about, if I was going to recommend one... If somebody said, I want to hear... What's the best Kanye album? This is the one I would recommend.
There you go.
Even the song Paranoid had that kind of, like, dance club mix that started in, like, the early 90s.
Yeah.
Which... This song could have been a hit in 1991. Of course, the anachronism is that it used auto-tune. But without that...
He always had a good sense of music, though.
He always had a good sense of music, and in terms of the like late 80s, early 90s feel, a lot of that is attributable to the 808s part of the album title. So the 808s he's referencing, the Roland TR 808 was sort of like one of the first, not the first, but one of the first reasonably affordable drum machines that you could lay down beats and samples and get a repetitive pattern on. It was only around for 2 years, but to this day you have hip hop artists that are trying to get their hands on it because the drum sounds are really warm. It is very distinct and a full sound that you don't get out of a lot of other drum machines. So they're still very sought after. So almost all the beats on this were done on a Roland 808, and hence the title of the album. But it's got that 80s feel as a result.
And that thing was omnipresent at the time. I mean, it was on so many songs. Phil Collins even used that. I think that's what's in the background on, damn it.
In the Air?
In the Air, yeah.
Yeah.
And I think there's even a documentary on the Roland TR 808.
Some instruments are just kind of iconic.
It's actually a fascinating story. That rich full sound that they could put out was because when they were building it, the chips. One of the biggest reasons, the chips that they were using in the machine, they got from a supplier, and they were not damaged goods, but they like weren't up to full quality control standards or something like that. They were slightly imperfect, and they got a discount on them. And the side effect was it created this full, rich, warm sound unintentionally, and literally they stopped making the 808 because they ran out of these chips and couldn't get any more of them.
Wow,
Cool.
All right, so let's take shots at it, which I think we've already done.
It shakes shot at itself. I mean, it's Kanye, for fuck's sake. The ego never goes away, as you noted, and it's just it's Kanye. It's just Kanye overload, but not in the worst sort of way.
And Kanye singing has the same limitation as Kanye rapping, which is he doesn't have a way with words.
No.
And that last track where he's freestyling live, I was like, oh my God, dude, just stay in the fucking studio. The only thing worse than you rapping in the studio is you rapping in
Man, yeah.
live. It's like, oh my God, this is horrible.
Yeah.
I've got 10 cans, but I have hands. Yeah. What? Oh, anyway.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay.
We have let's make it official. We have to vote. Corey, you want to?
We have to vote. I'm first. Let's see. I'll take the eponymous Beatles album. Scott?
Oh, Beatles, please.
Yeah.
Dave?
Of course, it's the Beatles. We're unanimous again. However, all right, I have good news and I have great news. All right. The good news is that was the last Kanye album that we have to discuss.
Yay.
Out of all the Kanye albums we talked about, that was the last one. And the great news is because it lost, like all the other Kanye albums, that is the last time we will ever have to listen to Kanye albums ever again while we're recording this podcast.
Oh my God, you're right.
For all our listeners out there, you don't know. You just don't know.
You don't know the trouble.
Oh, baby.
We not only sat through 5 or 6 Kanye albums because of the way we did that original episode. We sat through 5 or 6 Kanye albums back to back.
It was,
Again.
That was painful.
Yeah.
Absolutely
Yes,
painful.
we've listened to them at least twice.
It was like giving birth out your butt.
It was like
multiple
gnawing off your
times.
foot.
And giving birth out your butt at the same time. Yeah.
All right.
I don't know. I've had a couple of Mexican meals that have given me a rather close experience.
You haven't had my hot sauce.
No.
So we are done with Kanye, Mr. West. You can officially board the rocket.
I say
All right.
AMF. Adios, my friend.
Oh, you're being
Okay.
nice. Okay.
Yeah.
Hey, folks. Welcome back.
Hi,
Hi, this is Cory.
and this is Dave.
Oh, and this is Scott, too. Praising Satan as usual.
I thought you were going to introduce yourself when you said, "Hey, folks."
No, I just wanted to fuck with everybody.
but that would have worked too. But hey,
It reminds me of this Dick Clark, like back in the day of an American Bandstand when they used to read live commercials because it's the show was broadcast live and you read your commercials
Right.
live. You wanted to celebrate endorsement, so they just put a script of them. And there was one. I think he told the story later in life. A bank or something, and it was for they were doing this for a local show that they were broadcasting in Iowa for some reason. And the spot was the first line of the script was, "Hey, all you folks out there in Iowa," and live camera, Dick Clark looks right into the screen and says, "Hey, all you fucks out there in Iowa."
Nice. Yeah, you got to hand it to Dick. I mean, first of all, he was named Dick, which just is kind of a strike against you in the first place. Dick,
Dick,
yeah.
you got to hand it to him.
Dick. Anyway, what was I? Oh, yeah, I was going to mention. Cory, you mentioned that. You mentioned actually in the description of the show that we are not Satanists. We were just raised that way. But yeah, no. There's actually no actual Satanism going on except in the minds of weird listeners who think that sort of shit. So.
well, the only thing that Satanists teach is not to be a fucking hypocrite.
Pretty much, yeah. Don't be a hypocrite. Oh, and don't be a dick. That's the biggest thing. Don't be a fucking dick. We're just going to preface everything by saying that, yes, Kanye West, formerly known as Kanye West, known as Ye, is officially on the rocket going into the sun. In case people had forgotten that bit, we are still continuing it to this day in a fine tradition that we have here in America. We are putting you, Kanye, Mr. Ye, on that rocket, sir, and you will go into the sun, motherfucker.